A chill washed over me, colder than the autumn air seeping in through the cracked window. Emily's phone call, the breathless whisper, the giggle that seemed years too young for her, replayed in my mind. Not the voice of a woman discussing spreadsheets and budget reports. It was the perfume that hit me next, not the warm floral scent she usually wore, but something bolder, more expensive. The kind of fragrance a woman might wear specifically to be noticed. The unease had been gnawing at me for weeks. Ever since Stephen had taken over as her boss, the change in Emily had been, disturbing wasn't too strong a word. The dullness had lifted from her eyes, replaced by an intensity one hadn't seen since we first met. Her exhaustion had been replaced with a restless energy that bordered on jittery. At first I'd been glad, thinking the dead-end job had been suffocating her. Now I wasn't so sure. Just a late meeting, she'd said last night, rushing past me to throw on a jacket. Even in the dim hallway light, I'd seen the smudge of red lipstick on her collar. Crimson, not her usual soft pink. My stomach twisted. I wanted to confront her then, the evidence of another man so blatant. But what could I say? Accusations had no place without proof. The only weapon I had left was pathetic, willful ignorance. The receipt from LeBlanc's lay crumpled in my office desk drawer, a place she'd never look. We didn't go to upscale lounges, couldn't afford them. But Stephen? Wasn't that her smarmy new boss's name? My hands had shaken as I smoothed the paper out. The date and time, last Tuesday evening, the same night Emily had come home smelling of another woman's perfume. I closed my laptop, guilt gnawing at me as much as the suspicion. Sure, she cleared her browsing history, but was I really reduced to spying on my wife? Still, the temptation was too strong. A few keystrokes, luxury hotels in our city, and there it was, flashing on the screen. The type of place with thread counts that matched a month's rent, and where a glass of wine probably cost more than our groceries. Honey, I found this in my pocket. I forced false cheerfulness into my voice, holding up the receipt as Emily breezed towards the door, purse slung over her shoulder. Was going to toss it, but then I realized, LeBlanc's? Didn't you have a meeting there the other night? She'd paused mid-stride, her face flashing an expression too complex to decipher. Annoyance, guilt, or maybe even a flicker of fear. Oh, that, she dismissed, the smile returning a touch too quickly. Just a work thing. Client wanted to schmooze. Figured why not? Have someone else pay for my overpriced cocktail? Her fingers fumbled with the doorknob. Gotta run, or I really will be late. And then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her with a quiet finality. Alone with the lingering echo of her words and the gnawing, inescapable knowledge that they were lies, my legs moved mechanically, one heavy footstep blurring into the next. It was less a conscious decision to follow Emily, more a primal instinct. Every fiber of my being wanted proof, but another weaker voice whispered that not knowing might be the only way to retain a shred of sanity. But weakness had no place in the cold, determined, not tightening in my chest. Work became a blur. I fumbled through emails, my fingers trembling too much to type. It took 3 attempts to dial the client whose call I'd been dreading. My excuses sounded hoarse, even to my own ears. Outside her office building, the late afternoon sun beat down on me with vicious intensity. I huddled in the shadow of a coffee cart, the comforting smell of stale pastries at odds with the sickness rising in my gut. 5.15. The usual flood of workers didn't emerge. 10 minutes later my heart lurched as Emily, alone, walked through the revolving doors. She didn't hail a cab, didn't head toward the bus stop like she usually did. Instead, she turned, her stride purposeful. I fell into step behind her, a hunter tracking its prey. It was surreal. The familiar streets seemed warped, the bustling crowds reduced to background noise. All I could see was her back, the sway of her hair as she walked. My mind screamed variations of the same question. Where is she going? Where is she going? Where is she going? The answer was a sleek, modern apartment building, towering in a part of the city I rarely ventured. I watched, pulse throbbing in my temple, as Emily disappeared inside. A moment later, lit by the glow of the building's expansive windows, there he was, Stephen. They didn't head toward the elevator. Instead, they turned toward a side door, the service entrance. The one leading to those discreet penthouses I'd read about. My vision blurred, a wave of nausea forcing me to turn away. Home was a blur of half-packed bags and strangled goodbyes to the dog, muttered as I stumbled out the door. My car felt foreign. The usually mindless drive transformed into an exercise in controlled fury. Hours later, I sat staring at our wedding photo on the nightstand. We looked so young, so hopeful, so monumentally stupid. Rage coursed through me, hot and destructive. I longed to smash something, to hurl that picture across the room, to find some physical release for the pain twisting my insides. But I just sat. There's a peculiar stillness that descends after the world shatters, a hollow calm before the next agonizing wave hits. My hand brushed the screen of Emily's discarded phone. Should I look? Did I even need to confirm what my gut was already screaming? It felt like violating a corpse, but a part of me, the part already dead inside, needed the final, ritualistic act of witnessing her betrayal. Can't wait for tonight, boss. It's going to be fun. The words were like acid, and then my breath hitched. Below that, a hastily deleted reply. Only faintly visible, me neither. Last time was incredible. In that frozen moment, there was nothing but blinding certainty. Confirmation was a fist to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. I wasn't sure if I screamed or wept, or if any sound escaped at all. And then, rising above the howl of despair, one clear thought. She's going to pay. We need to talk. My voice sounded as dead as the feeling inside my chest. I watched Emily flinch, a flash of something akin to annoyance replacing the easy smile she'd walked through the door with. Seriously? Now? She tossed her purse onto the counter with an exaggerated sigh. I had the worst day and you need to unwind with your boss again? My words sliced through her facade, and she finally turned to face me, the smile gone. This was the version of Emily I'd been seeing more of lately. Sharp, cold, a stranger disguised in familiar skin. Don't do this, she warned, her voice low. Don't pretend you have some moral high ground, that you're the perfect husband. Don't tell me what I am. I cut her off, fury battling with icy misery. Just answer one damn question. Are you sleeping with him? For a moment there was just heavy silence. Then she ticked her chin, a defiant glint in her eyes. Yes, the word hung in the air, a death sentence for the fragile ghost of our marriage. I'd hoped, foolishly, for a denial, a lie, anything to preserve the illusion of the life we built. But there was defiance in her honesty, a brutal efficiency. And that's okay. Okay? I choked out, my voice barely above a whisper. It's just a fling, just sex. Somehow that thought was far worse than some grand romantic entanglement. I was nothing more than an inconvenient placeholder. Her eyes hardened. Look, it's physical. Okay? It doesn't mean anything. An apology, twisted and reshaped to absolve her guilt. I laughed then, the sound rusty and broken. Of course, I said bitterly, because the lying, the sneaking around, the sneaking him into our home, that's the part that signifies deep, abiding love. The fight unspooled in a blur of accusations, each thrown like a shard of that shattered vase. Old wounds, barely healed, ripped open and bled anew. Her complaints about my long hours, my emotional absence, my counter-accusations of her growing coldness, the distance that had been widening between us for far longer than this affair. The truth was, we'd both been failing for a while. Stephen was merely the final, catastrophic blow. Sleep had always been a refuge. Now even that was tainted. Each night, I'd lie beside her, the scent of his cologne clinging to her skin, imagining them together. Rage was a constant companion, alternating with soul-crushing despair. Work became a cruel parody, my colleagues' pitying glances more unbearable than open hostility. One evening, fueled by a sickening mix of whiskey and desperation, I almost did it. I hovered over the new message icon on my phone. Stephen's name a throbbing temptation. Did I threaten him? Expose his predatory games? But the realization hit, sharp as a slap. In sinking to his level, I'd only lose myself further. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the kitchen tiles. The whispers grew louder. I saw them, the concerned faces of friends hesitant to intrude, The covert glances exchanged behind my back. Emily stopped trying to hide her affair, flaunting her late nights and stolen weekends like a grotesque badge of victory. We were locked in a macabre dance of destruction, two ghosts haunting the empty shell of what used to be a home. The morning after one particularly vicious fight, I woke with a startling clarity. The searing pain had crystallized into something else, cold, calculated fury. While Emily slept, or pretended to, indifferent to my presence, I reached for her laptop. I wasn't driven by a desire to catch her red-handed anymore. I needed to understand. What started as an almost academic curiosity morphed into an obsession. I spent hours trawling through her meticulously organized folders, old social media accounts, emails with friends she hadn't seen in years. At first glance, it seemed innocuous. Yoga class updates, shopping lists, photos of her sister's kids. But I dug deeper, driven by a relentless certainty that the pieces were there. I just needed to find them. And I did, buried beneath innocuous work files, a hidden folder. Inside wasn't a confession or photos, but emails, messages stretching back years with men whose names I mostly didn't recognize. Coded flirting, coded meetups, the coded language of the practice cheat. My stomach turned. It wasn't just Stephen, it was a string of them. A nauseating realization dawned. Emily was the constant in this equation. The one who chose, discarded, and chose again. A surge of disgust washed over me. Had I been this blind? This monumentally stupid? Emily wasn't some love-struck victim ensnared by a manipulative boss. She sought this out. The thrill of the chase, the ego boost of seduction, and the inevitable crash. It was her pattern, an addiction she fed at the expense of anyone close enough to be damaged. I stumbled across a cached website, an online forum for employees, past and present, of Stephen's old company. Anonymous posts, whispers, and veiled accusations painted a chilling picture. Sexual harassment, the leveraging of power over young, ambitious women, the hushed cover-ups by superiors. My blood ran cold. This wasn't about passion or a genuine connection. It was about power, and Emily was tragically susceptible to its toxic allure. A sliver of pity twisted its way through my rage. Damaged people so often damage those around them. Still, the desire for retribution burned hot. She'd hurt me, yes, but there were likely others. If Stephen was the kind of man these rumors claimed, well, two could play at this game. I started methodically documenting everything. I snapped photos of her late exits, knowing exactly where she was headed. I collected the receipts she carelessly discarded, evidence of their rendezvous and expensive hotel bars. Evenings that had been spent in solitary misery transformed into twisted research missions. Each discovery felt like a small victory, a strike against the injustice of her actions. Yet, under the focus, there was a sickening hollowness. What was the endgame here? Divorce was a given, but merely walking away felt insufficient. Exposing Stephen would mean destroying my own life in the process, but the thought of him moving on, unchallenged to prey on more women, was equally unbearable. I was trapped, and getting more dangerously entangled each day. You could try taking this to the police, the private investigator, a burly man named Carter with the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much, said, but it'd be a messy fight. Nothing you've gathered quite meets the proof beyond reasonable doubt thing. I'd spent a sleepless night compiling all I'd found. Photos, dates, the snippets from that hushed-up scandal at his old company. Disturbing? Undoubtedly. But I knew Carter was right. Without something more concrete, it was just hearsay, fueled by a heartbroken husband's desire for vengeance. So that's it then. The words escaped before I could censor them. Laced with bitterness, I couldn't hide. He just gets away with it? Preys on the next vulnerable woman who crosses his path? Carter sighed. Look, I get your anger. Best advice I can give? Cut ties, move on. Guys like this, they have a way of getting their comeuppance eventually, but escalating? That's dangerous for you, for your wife. The mention of Emily made me flinch. In my twisted quest for justice, I'd nearly forgotten her existence as something other than a weapon to be used against Stephen. We still lived under the same roof, but only in a cruel mockery of domesticity. Brief forced exchanges were filled with barely concealed hostility. Each day was another turn of the screw. Surprisingly, it was Emily who pulled me back to the lingering thread of Stephen. "This evidence you have," she had said one night, the words hesitant, her usual defiance tempered by some new emotion I couldn't read. "Is it? Is it enough to actually do anything?" There was a vulnerability in her voice, surprising and unwelcome. Yet behind it lurked a familiar desperation, an eagerness for a quick fix, an escape, regardless of the cost. My bitterness flared. So now she wants my help cleaning up her mess? Part of me wanted to destroy Stephen, but another, darker part wanted to draw Emily back into the muck, to force her to truly own the consequences of the path she'd chosen. The stalemate was agonizing. We had enough to tarnish Stephen's reputation, to maybe land him on some HR watch list. But it was a far cry from real consequences. And as Carter warned, going further risked our own safety and well-being. Powerlessness gnawed at me. Even if Stephen faded from Emily's life, even if she moved on to another toxic savior, was that enough? The knowledge of him out there, still wealthy, still powerful, preying on whoever he wished, felt like a festering wound. In my relentless focus on bringing Stephen down, I'd lost sight of something vital. What did I truly want? Was it justice? Even the skewed version I could possibly attain? Was it protecting Emily, even though she no longer seemed to want it? Or was it the addictive burn of vengeance, the desperate need to see someone pay, regardless of how much collateral damage rained down on my own already shattered life? The question gnawed at me, relentless as the ticking of the clock above the fireplace. Evenings that had once been spent compiling my arsenal of evidence now stretched into long, sleepless hours haunted by doubt and the terrifying realization that I was becoming the kind of monster I was trying to destroy. "Packing's nearly done." Emily's voice was quiet. I looked up from the book I wasn't reading to see her hovering by the doorway, a small suitcase at her feet. "Right." I managed my throat tight, weeks of tension condensed into this small, sterile apartment. The temporary space we'd rented after deciding our home was too tainted with betrayal to endure any longer. "Should I help you get that to the car?" A flicker of something, regret, maybe even guilt passed across her face. "No, it's fine." I called a cab. The silence stretched between us, brittle and awkward. I just wanted to say goodbye, properly. I should have felt relief, a sense of closure. That's what I'd convinced myself I wanted. But instead, as I watched her go, all I could feel was the weight of unfinished business. Weeks of circling each other in this purgatory of unspoken accusations and half-hearted attempts at civility had only cemented the truth. We were shattered, and there was no fixing it. Life settled into a strange, hollow routine. A new job in a new, smaller apartment I barely furnished. Evenings stretched endlessly, no longer consumed by the furious energy of investigation. I tried to fill them with distractions, books, half-watched movies, long walks through streets that blurred together. Healing was meant to be occurring, but mostly I felt numb. Still, old habits die hard. I couldn't quite bring myself to delete the bookmarked websites tracking Stephen's career. The news updates were like picking at a scab, a perverse mix of satisfaction and seething frustration. He was Teflon. The rumors never escalated beyond whispers. His business ventures flourished. His reputation remained pristine, and each time, the gnawing bitterness would return. He was still out there, likely hurting others, and my grand scheme to stop him had amounted to nothing. Yet the world, indifferent to my internal battle, kept turning. There were random moments of connection, a birthday card remembered, a shared laugh when a particularly absurd news story crossed my feed, and then, the unthinkable, a text from Emily, hesitant and tentative. "Heard about Jenna L. from Stephen's new office. Same pattern, drinks, promises, the works." The name was unfamiliar, but the story sickeningly predictable. It wasn't even vindication I felt, just a dull ache, the confirmation of a monster's continued existence. And beneath that, a flicker of something else. I tried to let go, to move on, to convince myself the battle was over. But the fact remained. The wound would not heal with the monster still roaming free. There was no grand plan, no aha moment. Instead, Acceptance settled over me, heavy as a shroud. The fight wasn't over. It had simply changed. It was time to stop waiting, stop stewing in futile anger. Whether we destroyed him or not was almost irrelevant now. It was about refusing to be complicit any longer, refusing to let him continue to win by silencing us. The notification was like a jolt of electricity through my carefully constructed facade of normalcy. Stephen Montgomery, CEO, under investigation. My finger hovered over the news link, a flicker of dread twisting through the unexpected surge of anticipation. Years had passed, not enough for true forgetting, but enough for the white-hot rage to simmer into a dull throb. Emily had remarried, a quiet, kind man, the absolute antithesis of Stephen. I, too, had found hesitant happiness in a life rebuilt from the wreckage. And thankfully, the rumors circling Stephen had remained just that, rumors. I'd forced myself to turn away, to focus on creating a life where he became nothing but a fading ghost. Yet here was his name, splashed across headlines. I clicked, my heart pounding a hard rhythm against my ribs. Articles detailed financial impropriety, the sort that made jaded people nod unsurprised and say things like, bound to happen, grand larceny, money laundering, crimes far removed from the personal ones he'd perpetrated on so many. The sense of relief was immediate and undeniable. Yet, layered beneath it was a deeper, more complex unease. It was too neat, too coincidental, and despite the years, the old paranoia flared. Had there been whispers, rumors we'd never heard, that had finally reached the ears of those who cared? Had our relentless tracking of his career somehow raised flags elsewhere? A desperate need for answers bubbled up, a need I refused to indulge for years. I tracked down Emily. Did you hear? The words came out stilted the first time we'd truly spoken in too long. Her voice, when she answered, held a hesitant warmth. The cafe we met in was neutral ground, far from the echoes of our old home. Awkwardness hung heavy as we made small talk, a painful dance around the specter of what once was. And then, inevitably, the topic shifted. He got away with it for so long, she murmured, staring into her coffee cup. I almost started to believe he was untouchable. And now, I left the sentence hanging. Was there a connection to our feeble attempts at justice? We both desperately longed for it to be so, a confirmation that our actions, however misguided, had mattered. We made a choice, Emily said finally, her gaze meeting mine. We refused to stay silent, even when it hurt. Maybe that's all it ever takes. Maybe some cracks are just slow to show. We left it at that, an unspoken truce. As I walked away, the question that had haunted me for years resurfaced, demanding to be examined. Had we merely been witnesses to his inevitable downfall? Or had the stones we'd thrown, however small, created ripples that ultimately contributed to the dam finally bursting? The answer remained elusive. There was a bittersweet satisfaction in seeing him fall, yet it was tainted. True closure, I realized, would never come. We had survived, rebuilt, and in that, there was its own form of victory. And that strange and incomplete, as it felt, was enough. My phone's insistent buzzing jolted me awake, the harsh ring cutting through the comfortable, familiar quiet of my new apartment. It was Sarah, a mutual friend, and her voice when she answered was breathless, laced with a frantic energy that set every nerve on edge. Have you spoken to Emily? No one can reach her, not her husband, her friends, she just vanished. Panic surged through me, a brutal echo of that first agonizing discovery of Emily's dissection years before. Yet, this was colder, sharper somehow. Back then, there had been the fury of betrayal. Now, there was only a terrifying void. The days that followed were a nightmare blur. Frantic calls to her new husband echoed endlessly into voicemail. Social media posts pleaded for any shred of information, and beneath it thrummed an unending drumbeat of questions. Accident, voluntary disappearance, or something worse. The name Stephen hung in the air, a silent accusation. He had the means, the motive, and a chilling history of exploiting those who challenged him. But even those whispers felt insufficient to explain the utter erasure of Emily's presence. My world narrowed. Sleep became a fitful enemy. News reports with their dispassionate descriptions of a missing woman who mirrored my memories of Emily turned my stomach. And through it all, the guilt, relentless gnawing beast. Had our actions set this in motion? Had our digging awakened a darkness that refused to be ignored? A reluctant return to my old haunts became necessary. Carter, my former PI, offered little comfort, his blunt words a bucket of ice water to my flickering hope. Police don't care about disappearances until there's proof of a crime. And if Montgomery's involved, he covers his tracks better than anyone. Then a glimmer in the darkness. Emily and I, driven by a shared, desperate purpose, days spent in a cramped, caffeine-fueled room, sifting through social media accounts, old news articles, any trace that might offer a path to her. It was a lifeline of sorts. However feeble, the focus on her brought a strange comfort. There was no place for the ghost of our shattered marriage. Only two people bound by a terrible, unspoken question. Had trying to destroy a monster made us complicit in this? We stumbled upon her old journal. In its faded pages, she documented the early days with Stephen, a chronicle of manipulation masquerading as dizzying infatuation. Then further back, hints of other messiahs who had promised salvation and delivered only disappointment. Emily, with her fierce drive and aching vulnerability, how many others had she spoken out against, sought to expose, only to find herself even more alone? And in that revelation, a horrifying certainty. If Stephen was behind this, it wasn't about revenge. Emily was merely collateral damage in a larger game. When I was dangerously